Tokyo, Japan, Shitamachi District. Date March 10, 1945. Operation Meeting House, U.S. firebombing of Tokyo. I woke to the sound of wind that wasn't wind. It roared, deep and sharp, like the sky had torn open and was screaming through our walls. I blinked into darkness, and then came the light. Orange, flickering, alive. Like the whole city had caught fire at once. Mama pulled me from the futon before I could sit up. "Run!" she said. Just that one word. Her voice was shaking, but her hands were fast, wrapping me in a coat, shoving my bare feet into slippers. I couldn't hear my baby brother crying anymore. That terrified me more than the noise outside. Outside, the air glowed red. Our street in Shitamachi was narrow, packed tight with wooden homes. I saw neighbors already running, carrying whatever they could. Blankets, children, rice sacks. A boy tripped over his sandals and dropped his grandmother's photo. He didn't stop to pick it up. The sky above us wasn't dark. It was burning. I looked up. Hundreds of planes. Black shapes against a red backdrop. They moved slowly, steadily, as if nothing could touch them. And then the fire fell. It hissed as it landed, canisters of jellied death. Incendiary bombs, they would later say. But to me, they looked like steel teardrops with tails of flame. The first one landed 3 houses away. The roof exploded. A pillar of flame shot into the sky. People screamed, but the fire drowned them out. We ran. Down the alley past the temple toward the canal. Mama clutched my wrist so tightly it went numb. I remember the heat growing behind us, not just on our skin but inside our lungs. The air tasted of charcoal and oil. People ran into the canal, plunging into the black water. Some didn't come back up. I saw a girl about my age standing frozen in the middle of the street. Her nightdress was glowing with embers. She didn't move, didn't scream. I looked away. We reached the riverbank, but there was nowhere to hide. The flames moved faster than we did. Fire jumped from house to house, roof to roof. It wasn't just burning, it was chasing us. Tokyo was being erased. The wind changed direction, and with it came burning debris. My hair caught. Mama slapped it out with her bare hand. Her skin blistered instantly. We jumped into the canal. The water was freezing, but the sky was on fire. And that's how March 10th began. Not with the sun, but with 1,000 little stars that fell from the sky, one by one, to set my world on fire. Tokyo, Japan, Shitamachi District time, late 1930s, before 1941. Before the fire, before the fear, I was just a girl who loved goldfish. We lived in a narrow 2-story home on the edge of the Shitamachi district. Wooden walls, paper doors, and a garden the size of a tatami mat. It smelled like damp earth in spring and grilled sweet potatoes in autumn. I was 9 years old, and I thought the whole world was as small and kind as our neighborhood. My name was Aiko. My father worked for the postal service. He had hands calloused from bicycles and wore the same brown cap every day, even on Sundays. Mama was quieter. She sold handmade candles from a stall near the Sumida River and always wore a white apron, even when it was just the 3 of us at home. My baby brother, Haruki, was born in 1941. He had a round face and hardly cried, even when he was sick. I used to make faces at him until he giggled. I would have done it forever if I'd known how little time we'd have. I had 2 best friends, Yuki and Emi. We made paper dolls together and pretended the park bench was a ship. We didn't know what war was, not really. We knew grown-ups whispered when the radio crackled. We knew sometimes soldiers walked past in heavy boots, but we still played tag until dusk. In 1937, my uncle was drafted to fight in China. Mama cried after reading his letter, but I didn't understand. He sent me a drawing of a crane. I thought it was beautiful. I didn't know what it meant. In 1937, my uncle was drafted to fight in China. Mama cried after reading his letter, but I didn't understand. He sent me a drawing of a crane. I thought it was beautiful. I didn't know what it meant. As the years passed, things slowly changed. Rice became harder to find. Sugar disappeared. Then milk. We began growing bitter greens in old crates by the wall. Mama lined our futons with straw to keep the cold out. Sometimes we burned old newspapers to boil water. But even then, I didn't feel afraid. There was still laughter at the bathhouse. Still fireworks in the summer. Still festivals in Ueno Park with lanterns that swayed like tiny moons. We walked through crowds of people in cotton yukata, eating shaved ice with red syrup that stained our tongues. And we believed, because we were told to believe, that Japan was strong, that we were safe, that whatever was happening far away in Manchuria, in the Pacific, on the islands with strange names, would never reach us. That belief was like a paper window. It let in the light, but it couldn't hold back the fire. Tokyo, Japan. Time, December 8, 1941, March 1945, start of the Pacific War to the firebombing. The first time I heard the word war, it came from our neighbor's radio. December 8, 1941. I was 7. The morning had started like any other. Mama was boiling barley tea. I was brushing my hair in the mirror, trying to tame the 2 stubborn strands that always stuck out like antennae. Then the voice came, sharp, urgent, louder than usual. Papa came home early that day. He didn't say much, but that night he folded his uniform with extra care. I asked him what was happening. "Japan has stood up," he said. "To who?" I asked. "To everyone." The next day, our school gathered in the assembly yard. The principal spoke of Pearl Harbor, of America, of bravery. Then we sang the anthem with fists at our sides. I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was. I didn't know what enemy meant. But I saw it in the change on everyone's faces. From that day, Tokyo became tighter. Posters went up, bold slogans in black ink. Fight for the emperor. Endure until victory. Children collected scrap metal. Housewives joined fire brigades. Soldiers appeared more often in the streets. Rice rations were halved again. We switched to millet and beans. Everything became a matter of duty. We were told to smile, even if our bellies were empty. To bow lower. To speak less. Mama stopped selling candles and began working with the neighborhood women, sewing gloves and socks for the army. Papa stayed out longer and came home quiet. In 1943, I stopped going to school. There weren't enough teachers left. Some of the older students were drafted. Boys just a few years older than me walked past our house in training uniforms, wooden rifles slung across their backs, eyes full of something between pride and fear. Yuki's older brother was sent to Iwo Jima. He never came back. They said he died honorably, that his spirit became wind over the Pacific. Yuki never smiled again. We practiced air raid drills every week. Sirens would howl, and we would duck under our desks or run into the school shelter, a narrow, musty hole beneath the building. At first, it felt like a game. Then one night in late 1944, the sirens wailed for real. That was the first time we saw B-29s. They flew so high we couldn't hear them until they were right overhead. They dropped bombs on the edge of the city. Military targets, the radio said. We watched the sky flash in the distance. I remember thinking the lights looked like fireworks, but no one clapped. After that, the raids came more often. Each time they came closer. We dug a trench behind our house. Mama filled water buckets. Papa taught us how to smother fire with sand. We slept with coats by the door and bags packed with rice balls and family photos. One night, Ailey pointed at the full moon and asked, "Will they drop fire from there?" We laughed, then we didn't. By early March 1945, the raids were nearly every night. Sirens, smoke, broken windows, schoolyard shelters turned into makeshift morgues. Then came March 9th. The planes came before midnight. First a few, then more, then hundreds. They flew low. They dropped magnesium flares first. Ghostly lights that turned night into day, so bright I thought the sun had fallen into our street. Then came the bombs, not the loud ones, not the kind that exploded in one great boom. These were small, many. And they spread fire everywhere. Roofs, clotheslines, trees, people. Tokyo was made of wood and paper. The world didn't fall apart in a moment. It burned slowly, painfully, until there was nothing left to burn. And we were in the middle of it. When the sun rose on March 11th, Tokyo was no longer a city. It was a graveyard of smoke and ash. We had survived the canal, barely. Mama held Haruki against her chest, his skin cold but breathing. I had no voice left. My throat was raw from smoke. My ears still rang from the roar of the planes. I remember stepping onto land and seeing nothing I recognized. The streets were gone. The bakery where we bought bean buns, ash. The temple where I prayed for Papa's safety. Cinders. Our home? Gone. Not burned. Not damaged. Gone. We walked in silence, stepping over twisted bicycles, charred roof tiles, and shoes with no feet inside them. That day, I saw more bodies than I had seen people in my whole life. In the canals, on the sidewalks, pressed against walls. Some were curled up, as if sleeping. Some had their hands raised to shield from a flame that moved too fast. Others didn't look human anymore. No one cried, no one spoke. The city itself had forgotten how to make sound. We wandered north, past Ueno, looking for shelter. Every block looked the same, grey piles of destruction and the smell of wet burned wood and skin. By the afternoon we found a shelter set up in an old train station. Thin mats, rice gruel, water from a metal bucket. A nurse gave Mama ointment for her hand. She didn't smile. She didn't even blink, just passed us the salve and moved on. That night I dreamed we were still running, that the fire was following us, just slower now, waiting. Haruki started coughing on the second day. Smoke had gotten into his lungs. We wrapped him in Mama's shawl and gave him bits of rice, but he wouldn't eat. He whimpered quietly, like a kitten. I held him, sang to him. His skin was so hot. The shelter was full, overfull. Some families huddled beneath tarps in the alley. Others sat in the open, staring at the sky like they were waiting for the fire to come again. Every morning, someone didn't wake up. By the end of the week, the gruel ran thinner, the water lines grew longer. One morning, I stood 3 hours to get a half ladle of soup. It tasted like nothing, but it was something to hold. On March 18th, Haruki stopped breathing. He was in Mama's arms. She didn't speak. She just rocked him, for hours. I tried to close his eyes. They wouldn't stay shut. There was no funeral, no burial, just a wrapped bundle and a place near the station wall. We burned a stick of incense, but the wind kept blowing it out. That night, Mama took off her wedding ring and pressed it into my hand. "Hide this," she said. "Never sell it. Not unless you must." Then she curled beside the wall and didn't speak again until morning. We weren't living. We were waiting. For food, for water, for Papa to come home, for the war to end, for the next siren. Even the sky seemed afraid to show its full color. Tokyo didn't sleep. It whispered in ash and footsteps. We were only children, but we had become shadows, and shadows don't cry. They just try to stay close to the ground. In April, they told us we had to leave. The shelter was overcrowded. Disease had begun to spread. The nurses didn't have medicine, and the gruel was nearly gone. Mama held my hand and nodded when a man in uniform pointed us toward a government-run relocation camp in the outskirts. We didn't ask where Papa was. He'd been drafted in 1944, sent to the Philippines. We hadn't heard from him in months. His last letter was just 2 lines. "Be strong, watch the sky." So I did. Every day. We walked for hours to the camp, past what used to be neighborhoods. There were no streets anymore, only paths through rubble. Every so often you'd find a wall still standing, or a gate that opened to nothing. At the camp, we were given 2 tatami mats and a tin pot. Our neighbors were another mother and child. The boy had burns down the left side of his face. He never took his scarf off, even in the heat. Mama worked with other women boiling rice husks and cleaning latrines. I helped gather water. It was a life stripped down to bones: sleep, eat, wait. And still there were raids. The sirens came in the middle of the night. We would crawl into narrow trenches dug beside the barracks. Once, we waited 6 hours underground. A woman next to us gave birth in the dark. No one screamed. On July 25th, I saw another child steal food from a sleeping woman's bowl. I didn't blame her. She was younger than me, 6 maybe. Her hands shook. She was so thin, her sleeves looked empty. The woman woke and slapped her, hard. The child didn't even flinch. She just bowed and walked away, clutching a half-rice ball like it was treasure. Later that day, I found her sitting by the fence. Her mouth was full of blood. I asked if she wanted water. She didn't answer. I offered her Mama's ring. "Trade this," I whispered, "for food, for medicine, something." She stared at it for a long time, then shook her head and said, "You need it more." I never saw her again. That was the choice we all lived with, over and over. Who gets the last bowl? Who sleeps on the dry mat? Who gets to live? August came hot and slow. Then, on August 6th, word spread. A single bomb had destroyed an entire city, Hiroshima. 3 days later, another, Nagasaki. We didn't understand how. We didn't even understand what. But Mama said the sky felt wrong, that something big was breaking. On August 15th, everything stopped. The radio played strange music. Then, for the first time, we heard the Emperor's voice. Tinny, distant, like it came from the clouds. He said the war was over. Mama sank to her knees. I thought she would cry, but she didn't. She just whispered, "Finally," and closed her eyes. That night, I walked to the edge of the camp and sat under the stars. They looked the same as they always had, but I didn't trust them anymore. I had watched fire fall from that same sky, and I had learned that even stars could lie. When peace came, it did not feel like peace. It felt like silence. The kind that follows screaming, when your ears are still ringing and everything sounds far away. In 1946, we returned to Tokyo, what was left of it. Our old neighborhood in Shitamachi was gone. Not damaged, not broken, just leveled. A wide plain of dust and rusted nails. Someone had planted sunflowers in the cracks. We moved into a temporary barrack near Asakusa. It was built from tin and scraps. Every time the wind blew, the walls shivered like they remembered something awful. Mama took work cleaning government offices. I returned to school, though it wasn't really a school, just a room with crates for desks and a blackboard made of charcoal and wood. My first teacher after the war had a limp and never smiled. I didn't blame him. Haruki's name was never spoken out loud, but I carried his photo, the one Papa had sent when he was born, tucked inside my writing book. I kept Mama's ring, too. I still do. Papa never came home. In 1948, a neighbor who served in the same unit visited. He didn't have to speak. His silence told us more than any letter could. Mama thanked him and offered tea. He bowed 3 times and left. I never saw her cry. Instead, she worked. She lined the windows with paper to keep the cold out. She cooked miso with sweet potatoes and seaweed. She never asked me where I went in the evenings when I walked alone near the river. I was always looking for something. A memory, maybe. A place where the air didn't smell like burned wood. A feeling that I belonged to a time other than the one that made me grow up so fast. By the 1950s, Tokyo had begun to rise again. Buildings from steel, streets paved and wide. But I still looked down alleyways expecting to see fire. People stopped talking about the war. The Americans were everywhere, driving jeeps, handing out candy. Some children smiled. I didn't. Not because I hated them, I didn't. I just couldn't understand how the world kept moving when mine had stood still for so long. I became a teacher. Not because I had planned to, but because I wanted children to know how to speak, to think, to name what they saw, to ask questions and not be punished for it. And when one of my students once asked, "Sensei, were you afraid during the war?" I told her the truth. Yes, I was. Then I handed her a book. Because fear doesn't disappear. It only changes shape. Sometimes into silence, sometimes into memory. And sometimes, if you let it, into something that can teach. I'm telling you this because no one else in my family can. Mama passed in the spring of 1968. Quietly, without pain, beneath a blanket she had sewn from old scraps. She never spoke much of the war in her final years. But when she closed her eyes, I think she saw that night. March 10th, 1945. I know I still do. Papa never returned. His name is written on a wooden tablet in a temple north of the city. I visit sometimes. I bow, but the words always feel too small. Haruki would have been 30 this year. That's what I tell myself when I pass boys on the street with round cheeks and crooked smiles. Sometimes I imagine him beside me, grown, whole, walking through a Tokyo that doesn't burn. I speak now because silence kept us alive once. But silence also hides the truth. And the truth matters. We weren't soldiers. We weren't heroes. We were children who ran through flame, and mothers who carried babies into freezing canals, and fathers who vanished into smoke. The city we lived in is gone, but we are not. I still teach. And every year on March 10th, I light a candle by my window. Not just for the dead, but for the living who carry them. You don't have to understand what it meant to run from the sky, but you can remember that it happened, that we were here, that we still are.